Hi, I'm Andy Powell. Welcome to the Purpose Project. All topics are fair game. I hope you enjoy. All right, Henry, welcome to the Purpose Project.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Excited to be here.
So you're Henry Ebarb,
Correct.
and you are running for City Council this year in Prescott.
Yes, I am Henry Ebarb. I'm also the second. I always clarify that. My grandfather's in town. He's in his mid-80s, and he's been getting asked, like, oh, what are you doing running for City Council? He's like,
Oh, man.
it's not me. It's not me, which, thank goodness. He's enjoying his life. He doesn't need inviting any of the trouble in. But, yeah. I am running for City Council here in Prescott. Excited about, obviously, the prospect of what I could do if elected and the interests that I have in this community. Like I mentioned, my grandfather, he's here in town. Many generations of family here. So
did you grow up here?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I went to Washington Elementary, which is down the road from here. Went to Mile High Middle School, then went to PHS. Wasn't the ideal student. I've tried to be very clear on that. I was like, I was a little bit of a troublemaker, not the best grades, but then, went to Yavapai College. That kind of gave me a second avenue to kind of reassess what I wanted out of education, and mostly stuck with the state school system in terms of my education beyond high school. So largely, truly, through and through, an Arizona boy.
Right on.
About as real as it gets. Yep.
What'd you do after high school?
I went to Yavapai College, got my associates. Then I went up to NAU to study music theory and composition, actually.
Very cool.
During my time up there, I realized music theory and comp wasn't really a way to pay any bills. They were like, oh, you want to be a teacher? And I'm like, nah, I'm not going to teach. So I went to the political science program, and I said, hey, I've always thought about becoming a lawyer. What does the pre-law route look like? And got enrolled in that, studied political theory. That was kind of my early dipping my toes into governance and understanding how things worked. So went in for political science, got that done, got that degree done, took my LSATs, kind of prepped for law school. I did spend a good amount of time in Coconino County working in their probation unit. So I had some law enforcement experience, kind of had that set up. And then I got an opportunity to tour in a band. So like my left turn turned back into a right turn, went right back into music, proceeded to spend the next couple of years touring with a group, and kind of got to see really all of the United States, which really helped me realize just how unique and kind of awesome Prescott actually is.
Yeah.
I've been to every state but Maine and Alaska.
Yeah.
So I can tell people, I'm like, I've been to a lot of places. I've seen a lot of things.
Yeah, you can see the contrast.
Yeah, big time. And you get to see, too, what happens when a community dies. I mean, there was so many places I drove through that were little towns like Prescott. And driving through them, I realized, I'm like, oh, this is what happens if a community doesn't establish a vibrant population, a vibrant culture, have a really good head on their shoulders about where they're headed and what they're doing.
Yeah.
No future planning. This is what this could look like. And so a lot of my experiences, people ask about the cities. I'm like, the cities are cities. Some are really awful and I hate them. Some are great and they were great experiences. But it was these little communities that dotted the roadways in my trips all around the United States that I realized I was like, oh, I don't ever want to see that happen to Prescott.
Yeah.
It's a special place.
It is.
Yeah.
What instrument did you play?
Still play a lot of instruments, actually, but primarily guitar and bass guitar.
Cool.
I do some drumming. Over the years, I played violin and saxophone. Definitely had to do piano for my theory and comp degree, so nice. I did that too. So kind of a well-rounded musician. And my daughter's picked it up. She's a great piano player. She's not even been playing for a year, and she's already figured out music by ear and going after it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
I picked up a saxophone recently off of an auction for $42.
Of all the horns, that's my favorite horn.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, the sax is a unique machine, and I think it's because it blends in the two-part world of like, one, it's got really great tonality,
yes.
So it's got a very musical kind of form to it. But it's still got that epic horn sound, right? Big sound. Versus like the trumpet, it's just the big sound.
Yeah.
You don't get as much tonality of it. Not insulting trumpet players. Some of the greats played trumpets, but still, that's a good pickup.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do with sax.
Yeah.
Yeah, bass is my primary weapon, in fact. Yeah, I love bass guitar.
Wow, and you'd love to see, I got a Fender Jazz bass. That was my endorsed artist piece of gear. They created a custom jazz bass for me at Fender. And then I got a Warwick Corvette, double buck, and some other really cool products too.
Very nice.
I'll have to check them out sometime.
Very nice. Once I found the 5-string, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, wow. Why would anybody play something other than a 5-string?
Right.
But some people do some really impressive stuff with 4. What was the band you toured with?
The band was called You Hang Up. There was a couple buddies out of Phoenix. They actually met a kid who was a former child celebrity. He got involved with them by way of John Mayer, if I remember the story correctly. The singer in the band kind of knew them. They were jamming some point in L.A. So our drummer was a guy named Frankie Muniz, who played the title character in Malcolm in the Middle.
Yeah.
So yeah, we toured with him for a couple of years. Got to play some really awesome, unique shows, do some really cool things. So this is 15 years ago, but that was a very unique, crazy part of my life. During that period of time, I also met the lady who'd become my wife, Jess, who is here in Prescott with me, obviously, my wife. But I got to meet her during that period. So it was a lot of kind of monumental life changes. On top of it all, we're coming out of the great housing recession, this economic crisis. Everything was just kind of gangbusters at that time. It's just going nuts. Nobody knew what to expect or what to do. So,
is your wife a musician as well?
No, she's a graphic designer. I just met her off chance. I had a buddy who had gotten back from training with, I can't remember what unit he was a part of at that time, but he was needing a random place to stay and found our listing on Craigslist and was like, hey, I'm only going to be here temporary. Do you care if I do month to month? He missed my birthday, said, hey, come and check this out. So I went to his house, and this was while I was touring, so I was always in transit. So I went, talked to him for about 10 minutes, and she's like, hey, you guys come hang out in the living room. He's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I'm going to go talk to that chick, dude. What are you talking about?
Yeah. I'm
glad you're safe. Thank you for your service. I'm going to go talk to my wife.
Yeah. Do you do any vocals?
Yeah, so I used to play heavy metal, death metal, so I do all the screaming Cookie Monster growl vocals.
Cool.
I did that for a lot of years.
That's not easy.
No. As a matter of fact, I struggle to do it now. I always laugh because I'll start trying to do it and then I start coughing and I'm like, what is going on here? So I did that. I can definitely sing a little bit. I'm not like, our singer, he could hit all these crazy harmonies and high notes and go low. And me, I'm just like an even kind of very basic modality from a singing perspective.
You can hit the notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Better as a backup vocalist.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. And did you have military service?
I didn't. Long family history of it. I think the biggest thing was I wanted to. I graduated right as we kind of invaded Iraq. And so my dad and my mom were like, hey, it's not our vision for you to just go do the military thing. And buddies were getting injured and stuff like that was already happening. We were already getting, a couple guys who graduated the year before me went to serve, and there were all kinds of things just going on, very chaotic. So they kind of bartered with me to do some other things instead of go to the military, which is kind of ironic because like a decade on, they were like, your brother needs to go to the military. He needs some motivation and some help getting his life in order. So no, I didn't end up going and serving. It's a little weird missing piece that I always kind of feel like I wish I would have. But I understand where my parents were coming from, especially smack in the middle of invading Iraq. Looking back on it, and a lot of my veteran buddies here in town, they're always like, you didn't miss out much there. That was a disaster.
Dodged a bullet, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. You're not the first person to ask. I get that question a lot, actually. I'm like, do I just give off a demeanor? I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you run how many businesses here in Prescott?
So, on day-to-day operations, I'm running 3 different companies. One is my primary. It's a software services company that has its own leadership team, very competent people. They're doing what they need to do. And honestly, it's we're about to be in our 8th year.
Nice.
So we've been running that here for a long time. And that was the first one I founded when I moved back to Prescott. In addition to that, we built out a logistics hub for shipping.
Okay.
So hauling stuff to and fro, kind of truck and trailer. The common term for it is hot shot delivery services. Yep. So it's primarily geared to hot shots. We definitely have owner ops. We've got all kinds of different delivery solutions on the platform. So you kind of have different things you can do there. That's growing, but it's slow and steady. 2023 going into 24, they were calling it the Great Freight Recession. They hadn't seen as dismal of numbers as they'd seen something since I guess the 70s. The last time freight was this bad.
Wow.
So I launched this platform in the middle of the Great Freight Recession. But since then, it's been picking up. Things have been getting booked out. We're getting lots and lots of tender tickets and stuff like that. And then the third thing, which I kind of have like more back of office on, is a local landscape company.
Yeah,
doing
that
some
recently, that
services.
was last year you started that?
Yeah, in September.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good.
Good.
I mean, it's growing like crazy month over month, and got a good team on stuff. They're boots on the ground, so they know what they're doing, and they're knocking out projects for us.
Right on. What would you say is the biggest change that you've seen growing up in Prescott from being a kid to now?
Yeah, the big shift from primarily a pretty vibrant mixed demographic community in terms of like age ranges. PHS, when I graduated there, had well over 2,000 students. We had just had Tri-City start. Definitely had a lot of charter high schools in the area, but PHS was the big institution in Prescott. Bradshaw is the big one out there in PV. The younger population has primarily migrated to PV. This has become much more of a retirement town. So as a byproduct of that, a lot of what I've seen that's changed here is this sort of vitriol and infighting within the community about what is acceptable and what is not. It's always been an issue. I tell people that constantly. I'm like, Prescott's always had the same three topics they fought about for the last, at least since I was a kid, 40 years, about
Water, growth, and
water growth and then taxes.
taxes. Yeah.
Always frustration about taxes. And I understand that. I'm
yeah.
not,
Yeah, nobody wants to pay more taxes.
no, I'd like to pay less.
It'd be great.
It'd be great. So the tax issue. But for me, the biggest change that I've observed is just this, Prescott presents incorrectly. A lot of people go do demo research and they're like, oh, average income is only really this. And I'm like, yeah, but average net worth is through the roof. Like we have always been kind of a mountain town, but you kind of see this weird mix of like, we're a mountain town, but we're almost like a Jackson or almost like a Bend, Oregon, where you have a lot of wealth that's influxed. Prescott used to not be this way. It was not, we had a couple communities with higher end homes, but now they're talking about building $5, $6, $10 million homes in parts. That would have been unheard of. Nobody was building palatial places. And so for me, that's kind of the biggest change is I've noticed there's a bigger influx of wealth.
Yeah.
And then the medical systems to support it. So everybody talks traffic and all this other stuff. I'm like, man, we always had traffic. Downtown was always a mess.
Yeah. The more people, the more traffic you're going to have. That's just,
Yeah.
that's how it goes.
Yep.
And on the flip side of those more expensive houses, I know over in the Prescott Valley side of things, they're trying to build large amounts of lower income housing, right?
Yeah, they call it workforce housing or affordable housing. I've long made the case you need a diversity of housing solutions. It cannot just be one of one archetype and then hope that works for everybody. It's never a one size fits all. We're all at different states of life, right? If I was a single guy, I'd probably just be fine with an apartment.
Yeah.
If I got a family, I need a house. I need somewhere solid to live. So the housing solutions and the discussions around housing are really unique. And I think what a lot of people, especially in Prescott, forget is that the housing solutions that we can provide are going to set the tone for the rest of how the infrastructure and the development process in Prescott works. So if we're not going to ever create anything that is more affordable, giving them different tiers and levels of housing opportunity, you're going to have to import a workforce. So when everybody complains about 69 and 89A and Willow Creek Road just turning into a mess during the weekdays, it's like, that's an imported workforce.
Yeah.
They got to come from somewhere and they got to live somewhere. And ideally the staffing situation doesn't get like it is in Sedona, where it's like, I'm just not going to work there. I'm not going to bother with that community because there's nothing remotely affordable. And then I don't make enough to bother with the 45, 50-minute haul to get into the business. So that's a thing that, I think the big change in the next decade is going to come for Prescott is if we can't figure out how to make it more cost effective for families and younger people to find a way to live here, then we're going to be seeing a bit of a Sedona-esque type of a situation where it's like, can't get staff, can't get people in town. Nobody wants to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, a lot of people, at least that live here, worry about, it's that fight between growth and retaining the beauty of what this place is.
Yep.
So, and that's a fine line to walk when you want to drive by empty hills and mountains and stuff, and then you see developments popping up, and it's just, it seems like everyone's always kind of arguing about that. But like you mentioned earlier, when you were touring the country, you saw these failing communities. And once upon a time, I heard that if a community is not growing, it's dying.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of one or the other. You don't have a static state that's outside of time.
General social research and demographic studies show that a community can reach a certain degree of sustainability from an economic standpoint, let's call it. And that usually is pitched right around 350,000. The Quad City areas is about just under $250,000, if I remember correctly, based on the last census report. We're nowhere near that $350,000 mark. Dollar person mark.
Yeah.
We're nowhere near that mark. And so I think the fear from a lot of people when they hear that kind of population influx, that's what it needs to be. They're like, oh, we can't fit another 100,000 people here. And I'm not saying that we can, especially anytime near term, but I think at some point they have to recognize like our population has to grow a certain amount every year to prevent and stave off blight, to stave off people sort of giving up on the community and moving away. And it's, the first people that leave are always the service people. It's going to be the people that work in the restaurants and retail. It's going to be the people that work in construction and those kind of home services. So your plumbers, your electricians, like those are the people that wake up first in the morning and go, I don't have enough work this week to sustain. So I'm going to go where there's work.
Yeah.
And that's why those communities, you know, when you drive through the Midwest and especially the Northeast, you see these little towns that, you know, half the buildings are boarded up, the homes are abandoned and run down. That's what you're really seeing there is that it's like, hey, there was not enough to sustain to give anyone a decent quality of life, even if the community is beautiful. The quality of life had decreased so dramatically because of the lack of economic activity, they had to leave. So, no, Prescott, you know, we don't need to hit 350,000 people in the Quad City area. But we do have to have a certain amount of not regulated, but regular and normalized growth. Mm-hmm. And so anyone that preaches no growth doesn't realize what you're doing is you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah. You're not leaving yourself with options, which, again, the moment it stops growing is the moment it starts going downhill. Yeah. And that's when people leave. And I do agree. You know, it's hard when you drive and you see another hill has been terraformed into building community, right? But a lot of that stuff too was approved decades ago. Right. That's what they keep missing. And I know the Deep Well Ranch thing is very controversial, but that was voted on in 2017. There's no bringing that back. Again, that's almost 10 years ago now. And those homes are going to get built. And at the growth rate that Prescott's experienced the last 2 years, it's going to take 15 years to build 10,000 homes, probably more. It's probably going to be closer to 20. You know, I know when they first broke ground on Pronghorn on the backside of PV, that was like 2002. They still don't have that master plan community built out. Oh, wow. And that's only like 1,800 homes. So it just takes a long time. Like this stuff doesn't pop up overnight, regardless of how people perceive it. It does take time.
So I think a lot of people that don't choose to invest their time and attention into what's happening in the community and how does it work, what are the mechanics of this all functioning to give us the great world that we live in. I think when people hear something like, oh, city council, their ears kind of turn off or they start thinking about other stuff. Mm-hmm. So to the average person who doesn't know or doesn't really care, what does a city council person even do and why is it important?
It varies depending on the community. And this is a confusing thing for a lot of people because some people, you know, they kind of see some town councils or city councils and they're very active and they're busy day in and day out. With Prescott, that's not the case. We are a city manager-led city. So what the council does is we represent the people and the people's interests that voted to get us in there. And that's a myriad of interests, which people forget that. Sometimes they think, well, I voted for this guy and this is the one thing I care about. Why is that not being taken care of today? It's because we got 10,000 things we got to take care of.
That could be said for any elected official.
Correct. So for us, what it is that we vote on key items and issues, or sometimes council will hand it off to a ballot, like they're doing with this open space initiative. They want that on the ballot, and I'm sure we'll get to the open space discussion in a bit here. But what the council does in Prescott is that they make a series of, hopefully, good quality decisions, and then they hand those decisions off to the city staff to manage and deliver, right? Which is why we pay the city manager $250,000 a year, or something like that. It's about his salary. Our pay is negligible. It's literally like a compensation for your time. And so for the council, your goal
is not a living wage. You couldn't live off of a city council wage, right?
Not on $850 a month.
Yeah.
So what we're really compensated for is just our time and our ability to dedicate some energy, interest, and help the community at large understand what it is we're trying to achieve. So it's almost kind of like a reporting body as well as a decision-making body. of governance. And so it's kind of figurehead is the mayor, and then the council sits around the mayor, and then we kind of come together as a group to make a decision on a certain issue, whether that's a taxation issue, the open space issue.
And where does the city manager fall in that hierarchy between the mayor and the council members?
They're kind of the ones that deliver out, okay, council has said yes to this, so we have to now move forward on it. But then the manager goes through and says to the staff, okay, how are we going to execute?
Okay.
Because we don't execute anything. We just make a decision on yes or no, are we going to do this? Like the mountain bike thing that just came through recently. There was a vote. It's put to a vote on whether or not they're going to support it financially the way they have in years past.
Is this the race?
Yes.
The yearly race?
Yeah, the Whiskey Off-Road race. So that's a private entity. They're for profit. They're from out of town. I believe the amount of money they got this last year was $82,500, which grew from like a $10,000 initiative thing 20 years ago to what it is today.
So is that the city and the people paying those dollars, or is that...
It comes from the taxpayer.
Does any of that come from participants in the race or anything?
No, that's just what the city contributes.
Really?
The race collects racer money. There's all kinds of other ways they collect money, sponsors and things like that. Just that $82,000 is the city's quote unquote sponsorship money.
So then you have to determine is this temporary influx of people once a year worth that $82,000 to the rest of our businesses, essentially?
And does it generate enough sales tax revenue to offset that investment from the city?
Yeah.
On top of that, there was some compounded concerns of like, the city does the cleanup after the event day. So the city's responsible for cleanup. We're also responsible for security. So it's not just that one initial chunk of money. It's also these other commitments from the city to help make sure that this event goes off and there's no major issues.
That's city employees that block off the roadways. Correct. And all that,
all of
right?
That. Yep.
Okay.
That's
so
all on
is
loan.
Is that factored into that $82,000?
No,
that's separate
additional.
Expense.
And so they've kind of come to this conclusion that maybe it's about 120 to 130 of taxpayer investment to make this one event happen. And so the decision goes to now council to say, hey, do we want to continue to support at least the fiscal component of this event? Is it creating enough of a net return on our sales tax revenue? And so it was kind of a hodgepodge discussion, to my understanding. I watched a little bit of it. Presentation on the part of Epic Rides, who's the organizer, very good. $3 million in net impact is what they're claiming. The supposed ticket or tax ticketing from like the bed tax, which is how many people came in and booked hotel rooms, and then the overall sales tax, they believe there's an offset, meaning we should be getting more tax revenue than we're putting out into the event. Unfortunately, the city financial office says, nah, that's not what we're seeing. Which, the city, of all the sales tax, the city, I think, with the bed tax takes about 5.8%. The rest of the 13%.
Who calculates all this?
The city clerk. So
one person?
It's her staff. There's a couple of people that all work in there. They're assessing the tax revenues constantly, and they're trying to find, because a city can get behind things, and I'm not opposed to that, but it needs to be good business sense. And that's where I'm a businessman. I want to see that this is really, truly being offset. If someone asks me for those decisions, that's the kind of thing I would want to have a say on, is like, well, is this a good business, sensible opportunity? Yes, is it good for the businesses locally? Sure, I'm sure the hotels are stoked.
So to put it real basic for regular people who don't care about politics or any of that, a city council person in this case would act as a go-between for the people to the manager.
Correct.
Act as a voter for any of those issues, and someone who builds relationships in the community to try and move things this way or that way.
Correct. Navigating all of those issues.
Basically it for this region.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So we're literally called upon every other Tuesday, and that's our role. We just show up, we get a packet, we deliberate, we go to the people, we hear them, and then we make a decision.
Is all this stuff recorded and publicized?
Yep.
We can go online and watch it?
Yep.
Any of the meetings and all
Any of the
stuff.
meetings, the city of Prescott publishes their live feeds, so you can sit there and watch from work or home, if you're just trying to be cued in on what's going on. And I do encourage that, because unfortunately, there's a joke in Prescott that the city council is actually run by a shadow council, and it's a strong-willed, outsized voiced group of locals that probably retired, who can show up to these meetings and share every concern and share every frustration and make it super, super clear how they feel on things, when 90% of the community we don't hear from them.
They're at work.
Yeah. So, and I've been told, they're like, get ready for that, because 90% of the community, you're not going to hear from them. They're working, taking care of family. They're doing the things they need to be doing. But there's a small group that they're very voracious. They come in, they want everybody to know, this is my idea, and I want you to know that I'm concerned about X, Y, Z. So yeah, I mean, that is kind of our role. We act as the liaison, so to speak.
How many city council slots are there here?
With the mayor included, there's 7.
And how many are available in this upcoming election?
So there are three seats, 4 people contending and vying for those. One individual in particular did something that I know some people are concerned with. He threw in his name for Kathy Rusing. She's resigning her seat so she can run for mayor because her term won't be up for another 2 years on city council. You can't have
both.
Both. So she's resigning that seat. Well, one of the individuals running for a council seat threw his name in the hat, which they've already dismissed that individual, but threw his name in the hat for that open seat, which was kind of like you went through the trouble of collecting signatures, getting your name on the ballot to try to sidestep the democratic process, which felt very gross.
Can you say who this is?
Yeah, Jim Gehring.
Jim Gehring.
Sweet guy, Navy veteran. I mean, he's a really good dude, but very bizarre decision in my opinion. I'm like, why would you go through all the trouble to get on the ballot, put your name out there, start the campaign process, then like a seat comes up and you're like, you know what, maybe I don't want to do this whole campaign thing and try to appeal to the people. Maybe I'll just get nominated, an appointment position.
Power corrupts.
Yeah. And clearly some people do. They just want to get the most direct line to the goal, right?
Yeah.
And
you want to get the promotion.
Have to do the work. Yeah.
Whatever it takes. Easiest path, right?
So for me, it was frustrating to see that occur because I was like, come on, dude. Like, your name's been in the hat with several of us for a while. Why step around it?
So we got 4 people running for 3 positions.
Correct.
So basically 1 person's getting kicked off the team. The other 3 are going to make it in for sure.
Correct.
And are these partisan groups? Is this partisan at all?
No, it's nonpartisan by nature. Sorry, there is a 5th. You mentioned the partisan piece. Jay Ruby. He hasn't been able to come to most of the events because he's a Democrat, and if you're involved with any of the Republican events, you can't, for whatever reason, they don't let anyone cross the party line to speak to the other party, which is kind of odd because most of the groups are NGO, they're nonprofits, like RWAP. So it's kind of like, why not let the guy speak? I mean, if he says something damaging, that's on him.
RWAP is Republican Women of Prescott, for those who don't know listening.
Yeah, sorry, I'm using an acronym here. But yeah, so to me, I'm like, we should let them speak because what's the harm?
Seems like we'd get more done if we, work together.
Yeah, especially in the event that he does get elected. I mean, there's a good chance. He's very strong on the water views. A lot of people in town seem to think he's pretty center, even though he's a Democrat on paper. So, if he got elected, I'm like, well, he didn't speak to half the community for this election cycle. And it's the same for me. Apparently I'm not allowed to go speak to like the young Democrats and things like that. And it's like, well, I'm not. It's a nonpartisan election, and I am going to represent all of Prescott.
Yeah.
But
you can hold an open forum and say, hey, anyone's invited, and somebody who's a part of the young Democrats or whatever, they can attend.
Yeah, and
anybody can come see you speak.
Correct. We are doing one on June 5th at Ebarb. And so I am.
That's right.
Yeah, we got there was supposed to be a debate. A couple of the candidates bailed out. They were like, I don't know. This doesn't feel. I don't know. I don't really know what the heck's going on.
Well, some people are better at speaking off the cuff, and some just, they have strength in other areas, or they got something to hide. I don't know.
Yeah. A little bit of the something to hide is what concerns me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because, they're the tacit, age-old politician. They've been in the game already for a bit.
Oh, so they know how to play the chessboard in a way. It's like, oh, well, if they don't hear me say anything, they can't have anything to hold against me.
And that's kind of my biggest concern with a couple of the candidates is like, I want to avoid a place where I can get called out.
And
for me, I'm like, find me and call me out.
Yeah.
Like, if you're thinking I'm doing something and concerned, we did one at Founding Fathers. Lady got up. She's like, I hear you being pro-growth. I think you're going to turn this into a woke hellhole. Why are you doing this? And I was happy to try to diffuse and discuss and explain where I was coming from. So, I like that feeling. I'm like, and that's one of the most interesting pieces about local politics is like, I'm going to get called out.
Yeah.
I'm not in Congress. I'm not in D.C. where people can't find me.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm representing people here.
And when you address those things directly, I think a lot of what we're doing is diffusing fears, diffusing unrealistic fears and expectations.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important because people operate poorly when they're operating from fear.
Right. And that's my issue with the water issue up here. We live in the high desert.
Yeah.
I've made it very clear. Water is always going to be an issue, but let's be realistic about where the issue lies. A lot of the discussion in the city of Prescott is like, well, I'm just going to run that water is a big problem and we got to fix it. And that'll be enough to get me the votes because people hear that and they go, well, they're a candidate that's strong on water. And it's like, well, we're all strong on water. None of us is just going to like, here, have some free water.
Forget water. Yeah. We don't really, we're not concerned.
Well, I mean, the state, they were handing it over to the Saudis or whatever was going on with that alfalfa farm for the horses and the camels or what was going on. So, yeah, it's like clearly somebody in government was not caring about the water situation. That's not any of us. My thing is, and what I keep trying to tell people about water is Prescott actually does a good job. Are we perfect? Heck no. The problems lie with the wildcat expansions that go on out in the county, where it's like, if I own 36 acres, I can subdivide that into 2-acre parcels and sell it to whoever I want. And you can't stop me. There's legally nothing that anyone can really do to stop me. And so where people come up with the issue of water is like, okay, well, how many unregulated wells are we talking? And the facts and figures are super all over the map with this. It's anywhere from like, they're using about 1.5 times the typical household uses if they're on an unregulated well to all the way to double for same square footage. So we know they're using more water. I don't know. They don't really have an assessment as to why maybe unregulated wells are using more water versus people who live in the city limits and they can meter it. There's some theory that maybe they don't notice leaks or they're not as attentive because they don't get a bill.
How do they track unregulated well water usage?
Correct. They don't.
Then how do they get this figure?
Well, I think it's a combination of backwards engineering from like, well, the water table's going down. We know that to some degree, but they don't know why. And again, there's also a corporate entity that has a regular interest in what goes on the Verde River and the water tables up here with SRP. And I've often said the SRP studies are problematic in my opinion because they want to make sure that Prescott and the Quad City areas and Northern Arizona in general doesn't grow because they need that Verde to run. Because if it's not running, they're not making money.
Yeah.
So they have a vested interest in ensuring that that water has some sort of a narrative behind it. But, you know, you hear the horror stories, right? The Granite Estates, which is not in Prescott. I keep trying to correct people on that.
Where is it?
It's up Williamson Valley Road, like way out there.
Oh, yeah. I know the area.
Apparently the builder was warned years back when he first started selling those parcels off, like, hey, you know, this is not a water table like the big or the little Chino where you throw a straw in and there's a big reservoir. It's more like an underground river, so to speak. Oh, the waters move and fluctuate, and there's all kinds of things that can impact your ability to pump water. But beyond all that, that's just not in the city of Prescott. So they're not recharging water. That's the other thing with a lot of these wells and septic systems. There's no real good way to release the water back into the earth. With the city of Prescott, we do the waste treatment, and they pump the water back into the earth. After they treat it, they put the water back into the ground as best they can. And so our recharge rates are phenomenal. I mean, we're ahead of most communities, and we're great at managing our water resources. The concerns should lie what's going on in the county. What's PV doing? What's Chino doing? Let's look at their data, you know, because we can honestly say City of Prescott does a dang good job running their water resources. It's not that it's again, I have to be careful because I've said it once. It's not as big of a concern. It is a big concern, but the concern is an issue to deal with our partners, our other communities, and our other governments. We need to make sure they're on the same page with what we're trying to secure and safeguard for future generations. Which is kind of, again, I say this is a circular issue for you all. So you want to safeguard water for future generations, but you don't want anyone else moving here. So what future generations are we talking about?
So what's the issue if somebody has a 36-acre parcel and sells off 2-acre pieces here and there, and then each of those 2 acres want their own well?
Yep.
But they're drilling into something that's fluctuating, so they get frustrated that there's not enough water?
That's the perception, is that they're pulling enough water out of the ground finally that they're worried about the recharge rates for those reservoirs.
Okay.
Especially if we get a drought. The last couple of years have been dismal for moisture.
Yes.
Again, it's a desert. This is where we live. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have a contingency plan, you're going to run into headaches, and you're going to do like that community north of Scottsdale where they're literally trucking in water every day right now.
Jeez.
So that is a risk of living out in these unregulated, unincorporated communities, is that, yeah, you're dipping into a finite resource that may change for a variety of reasons based on my understanding. And this is even from like CWAG, the civil water group that's up here that does all this analysis. they've even said that things fluctuate over the years. So in my perspective, I'm like, so what are the facts? The facts are with the cities, with the municipalities, they have people that track this and know what's going on. They can give you data. With the unregulated wells, we just don't know.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to say with any kind of certainty what is actually happening.
You mentioned the Big Chino and the Little Chino aquifer. Is that what they're called?
Yes.
Is there a map that we can look at to show this is where this aquifer rests underground?
Yeah. The Arizona, I think it's like azsos.org or something. They have a variety of resources you can go and look at from the data tables. They can show you maps on like where these different aquifers are. They can show you the water ranch that Prescott mutually owns with Prescott Valley and how that water resource is being managed. Now, something that always needs to be clarified, no one has tapped into the Big Chino aquifer. That is not a tapped water resource. We only use the Little Chino aquifer.
Do you know the difference in size between the big and the little?
My understanding is that every assessment they've tried to do to get a measurement has come up like there's a lot, but we don't know what it is. So they've tried to assess. I mean, one gentleman once told me it's like that the Big Chino is like an underground ocean.
So who gets to decide when or where to tap into that?
Well, the state, because the state has a management, they're AMAs, so they're active management areas. They have these rules about how water works. And a lot of that was put into place because of the Colorado River. I mean, when they decided to let agriculture boom along the Colorado in southern Arizona, they realized like, we're going to have to share this with California, which California siphons off like 67% of Colorado's water. And we're going to share it with Nevada, Utah, and us. And then, of course, Mexico gets whatever remains, which ain't much. So those aquifers are technically under the purvey of the state, but the actual management and how that process works, I'm sure there's a whole series of statutes you'd have to come through to figure out, like, what does this even look like? Are we draining it, and do we need to tap into the big? And if we tapped into the big, what does that mean from a water resource consumption standpoint?
Yeah. So there is water.
There is water. And the question is it how usable is it? How attainable is it? How sustainable is it? People just don't know.
Two other questions on that. One would be these smaller communities, let's say I buy 2 acres, want to drill my own well and hit one of these fluctuating rivers that's underground. Do those impact the Little Chino reservoir?
They would, because it's runoff.
So
that's usually weather hydraulics is my understanding. So they, what we see coming off the hill isn't just Granite Creek. It will seep and it gets into, my understanding is these like underground little pockets of water, and they all eventually just drain down into the bigger aquifers.
Okay.
Some of our lakes sometimes catch up some of that water. And again, this is an area where I'm really been deep diving the last 6 months, but admittedly, there's people that know more about this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about how they're presenting their information.
Yeah, and that's the most crucial part for deciding where we're going to go as a community. Yep. We want to know what's happening, how it's happening, and what's going to happen based on what decisions we make.
Right.
So then, so these tiny parcels with all their wells do affect that aquifer because they'd be using it possibly faster than it can drain back and refill.
Yes.
That's
so
the idea.
The recharge would be impacted by those differentiated communities.
Okay. Question number 2 is Watson Lake, I believe it is. Is that the one that is contaminated with, there's like a crack in sewage or something, so that
could be draining into it.
They could be draining into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Arizona's lakes, because they're all man-made, I don't know if we have a naturally occurring reservoir anywhere. They all are at risk for this, especially anything that's located nearby to city infrastructure. Unfortunately, we're in a pickle. People talk a lot about, well, we have the general fund that pays for roads, that pays for water infrastructure, and I'm like, yeah, but that pays for the new. And unfortunately, the last 4 years, we have a council that has wanted to just focus on their one token issue that got them elected, which is no growth, which they haven't stopped growth, not even a little bit. They've normalized it maybe, but that even might be giving them too much credit. The economy kind of normalized growth. We came out of COVID, and what a shit show that was, and we came into the next phase of life. And so people that could work remote kind of found their new landing. People that didn't, a lot of the retiree, influx, that is naturally slowing just because boomers are now retiring at a slower rate because there's just less of them. The bulk have already retired and they've found probably their landing spot.
What is a boomer?
Just a generational, I don't know if it's a derogatory term at this point, but a baby boomer. So that generation of retirees.
Is there an age range that?
Yeah, I believe it's like, I think it's like everybody younger than 92 down to like in the mid 60s at this point.
Okay.
I can't remember the last time I checked Wikipedia on what that range exactly was. I just know that millennials are kind of categorized as like 82 to 2002 maybe.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're born between those years.
Yeah, that's like your generational
82,
group.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
maybe it's like 96, and then it's Gen Z. And then before us was Gen X.
Yeah, I get
don't know.
confused about all these different generations and who's where and if you're calling me a name or not.
Yeah, and I always tell people too, I'm like, if I'm a millennial, I'm like a gap millennial. I belong with the Gen Z and that kind of entrepreneurial spirit and get it done and work hard mentality. I'm like, most millennials are like, I just want my corporate cakewalk job. And
The marker that I usually use is did you grow up as a kid without the internet?
Yeah, that's me.
That's kind of how I changed. Yeah, I think we are probably one of the last generations that.
And we're older millennials because younger millennials did grow up with it. You know, if you were born in 92 to 96, you kind of had the internet always in front of you. Mm-hmm. You might not have known it about 2-3 years old, but so what?
Yeah.
You know, as soon as you could interact with devices, you were interacting with devices. So
exactly. How long is a city council term?
4 years.
And how can somebody? Obviously, somebody could step down if they want to.
You can resign.
Is there another way to get somebody out of a position if we don't like what they're doing or whatever?
It's difficult.
Okay.
If they refuse to show for their service, that is one of the easiest ways. They can get a vote of no confidence. And I believe that's something like if you don't show up for 3 council sessions without any kind of reasoning. Unfortunately, though, I mean, you look at the town of Prescott Valley, the gentleman that just resigned. I mean, my understanding, the dude was a crazy tyrant. I don't know if that's true.
Do you know his name?
Bill Williams.
Oh, yes. Okay. I interviewed him.
Oh, did you?
Wait, this might be a different Bill Williams. He seemed like a wild dude.
Well, my biggest concern with him was like he's writing for Prescott News, and I have not once tried to hide that I think David Stringer is a scumbag, and to my knowledge, he's the owner and operator of that entire publication.
He is, yes, and that is the Bill Williams I interviewed.
Okay, so he resigned, and again, I don't know the situation out there. I just know what was discussed. He was portrayed as someone who was totally out of control, off the cuff, just causing chaos. Mm-hmm. Now, whether that chaos was justified, I don't know. I don't pay enough attention to what's going on in PV outside of the bigger picture issues, like how do they relate to the other communities, what's going on for growth out there, some of the basics. My understanding is he was very frustrated with a lot of things, especially how Cal Paguda was handling stuff. Very, very frustrated with it. But a lot of people said he was just using it as an excuse to be disruptive and disrupt the workflow. But there was no, as far as I could tell, there was no way to remove him from his seat or remove anyone else. It seems like the only way to get rid of these politicians is to vote us out, which is fair. Yeah. If we're not doing our jobs and we're not good at what we're doing, we're making bad decisions, get rid of us.
Yeah.
You know, that is the nicest thing about democracy and being a politician. It's like, you know, your job is always kind of on the line. Like, you're not just going to be able to skate by. You may be able to do that at corporations. You can't do that in town.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I recall Bill Williams saying a lot of specific things about how he didn't like Pelguda and what he was doing or what he stood for. Mm-hmm. I don't know Kel. I've never met the guy, but kind of moving on to some other stuff. I wanted to get your perspective. Basically, give me like a citizens briefing. If you were going to brief the citizens on these different issues, what would you say about them in summary? We already talked about water. We talked a little bit about infrastructure and growth planning, but with the growth planning and the permitting, where's all that stuff at? Where's it going? And how do you relate to it?
I've spent a long time around the building community here. I mean, I grew up the son of a roofer, so I understand what goes on to get these things done. In my opinion, the city needs to kind of just get out of the way and let stuff get built. And that's across the board. That's not just housing, which I do think. And, you know, this I can't give a name, but I was told the directive internally at City Hall is you will do everything you can to make building anything painful and slow. I don't think that's a good mantra. I don't think that's a good measure of things. That's not going to stop the inevitability that those homes will get built, that people will inevitably move here. I think what they need to do is to make sure that if anyone is building or they're putting something new together, that they are meeting the requirements of the city, whether that's code, whether that's the water resource requirements, how they're putting the water back, they're using the latest and greatest. Enable those things so that we're being cognizant of, what can we do for our water and our concerns around water. But the people have a right to build. And if you're going to try to stall builders will get fed up. They will lawyer up. Now the city's suddenly spending money on lawsuits. Again. Well, and they're already still dealing with the eco-development situation, which is, to me, they decided, well, we'll just turn a blind eye to it and ignore it, and maybe he'll go away. He didn't go away. Yeah. He went and got some lawyers, and now they're suing the city. And I think it's an arbitration at this point. Maybe suing the city is a little too aggressive, but they're fed up.
Well, for people who don't care or think this doesn't affect them, if the city gets sued and the city has to pay out millions of dollars, that's your tax money. Yeah. That's not the city. That's not the government. That's you.
Correct. Well, and what it is the insurance company will pay out a settlement. And then the city's got to come up for now. We got to either go get a new insurance company.
Pay back
We're going to be paying
loan.
a huge amount of premiums. Yes. It'd get ugly real fast. And not to mention that the city's spent over the last 4-some years, like a net sum of like $40 million. I mean, they made an $8 million acquisition of a small parcel of land near the airport because of the fear, the perception of someone could build something there and that would impact the airport. When you're wasting taxpayer money like that, suddenly it makes the mountain bike event seem real small and insignificant. So that kind of a thing, I'm like, that's a lack of fiscal responsibility. So when it comes to growth, I think we've got to do what we can to make sure that it's well managed and it's strategic, meaning I don't know if we need a bunch of, $1.5-2 million homes like we have in Capitol Canyon, Hacienda area. We need some other opportunities. So we go back to the builders and we say, look, this is the type of housing we need. We can't let you build a bunch of McMansions. So what can we do to make this happen? And it's not just there. I've heard reports from everybody. I got a buddy who tried to open a donut shop. Took him 9 months. Said dealing with the city was a nightmare every step of the way. It's like, that's unfortunate. And that's a local entrepreneur. Help them out.
This all just comes from the no growth at any costs sentiment?
That is correct. That is my understanding. Nobody's pushed back on it yet. Not even some of the current council. One of the current council has basically said, yeah, that's what's going on. He kind of, he didn't agree exactly how I framed it, but he definitely agreed with the sentiment is growth is a bad thing, so we don't want it going on. So how can we kind of
So if somebody's trying to
stall it out,
add something to their estate, they own a business, they're trying to add some additional piece, but they need permits for it.
Yeah.
And that's part of the backbone of the community is the entrepreneurship, the small businesses.
Yeah.
And this guy can't add this one piece to his already functioning business. That's kind of, like you said earlier, shooting yourself in the foot as a community, preventing that entrepreneurship from being the backbone.
Correct. Again, that's how you develop tax revenue resources, right? If we're paying a sales tax, what do we need businesses to do? We need them to be able to sell more so you can collect more sales tax revenue.
And this stuff is all being handled at the city level. This doesn't have anything to do with county government, right?
No.
Permitting?
Nope, not if it's within city limits.
Okay.
It all goes through that office right around the corner from here.
Okay. What about a citizen's brief on public services? What are some of the public services here?
Yeah, the big ones are always police and fire. And this is one of the things that frustrates me is that prop last year that passed, a transaction privilege tax. So again, people don't see it this way, but I'm like, it's an additional cost to living, increase in cost of living. Like, that's what you're doing. You're saying if you need tires for your truck, you need school supplies, you're going to make sure that they're paying 1% more to support fire and police. How come we didn't think about that when we spent tens of millions of dollars buying up land for open space? That is questionable and whether or not that was ever going to be used for anything but just staying open space anyways. So public services in Prescott have long been a problem. In the sense that what they get for budgeting doesn't fit the demand. My bigger concern is definitely always fire. Fire responds to every type of emergency. I mean, unless it's literally just somebody, speeding, 9 times out of 10, fire's going to be there. If somebody's intoxicated, fire has to show up because that guy could be so obliterated drunk, he needs medical attention, IV, all that. Heart attacks, fire. A kid falls off his bicycle and hits his head. That's fire. So fire is showing up to every single thing. And my understanding is we are wildly understaffed in that area.
Okay.
And not only that, we need more firehouses. So public services are a big concern for Prescott because it has grown so rapidly. I think the last big firehouse is the one we have on Smoke Tree that was built 20 years ago.
Jeez.
So yeah, when you see things like that, and you know the population went, yeah, well, and the population went from like 22,000 back in '05 when that was built to whatever it is now, almost 45,000. We've doubled in size. We haven't doubled any of those resources.
Oh, wow.
And then on the other side of the public services, you do have the maintenance, you do have the crews that go around and keep the sidewalks clean and keep, you know, the city up to a certain standard. And my understanding is that's also in a struggle point. Now, there's talk, could we privatize some of that management? Yes, but that almost always costs the taxpayers more money when they tend to outsource some of those components. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why government contracts have wound up in the situation they're in. I know the companies like to chase them, but that is a bit of a concern. And so for me, public services, you know, it's addressing the actual boots on the ground, but then also some of these infrastructural components as well. Is our staff capable of handling those items? Even if we do have to outsource some elements of it, like replacing the sewage line that could be cracked and leaking into the lake, you know, can they move quick enough? Do they have the adequate staffing to do that? Or is it a lack of government efficiency? That's going to be my day one question. Are we being efficient with our resources?
That's where I'd put my money.
Correct.
Having worked for the government, it's terrible.
Yes, there's a huge lack of efficiency. I mean, we all know police, fire, they're responding as quickly as they can because that is their job by definition. But everybody else, there's this big question of like, is any of this being run efficiently? Do we feel confident that they're handling it as efficiently as they could? And how much red tape are they deliberately putting in the way of me getting something done?
Yes.
And so for me, that's an area where I'm like, we need to figure that out immediately.
When it comes to the amount of employees we have for fire and police, is that something that can be changed through a vote? Like, hey, we have to hire X amount more firefighters per this many people next year? Can we do that?
That was that vote on that prop, 478, I believe it was, that pushed the fire safety, public safety initiatives through. So the vote is for that. The money is supposed to be guaranteed for that. Now, my biggest question is, are we going to hire firefighters and police officers? Or are we going to take that money and hire admin and buy stuff that nobody really asked for?
That's what county did.
Right, correct. And so I'm deeply concerned around those issues because from where I'm sitting, I'm like, I don't know that we need better gear. Like, we don't deal with drug land situations like they do down south with the smaller communities where the sheriff's office needs some of those tools and equipment. So my concern is like, can we be smart with this money and actually do what we said we're going to do, which is A, increase the pay of some of these guys so they quit leaving.
Yep.
And B, let's hire some actual, in my opinion too, this is what also frustrates me, let's hire true locals because they're less inclined to leave.
Yeah.
If their family's already here, they've got everything established.
They're invested. They're
not going to, after 3 years, all right, I got some experience under my belt. Let's go somewhere that actually pays me a wage I want to get paid. And so for me, and my question about all of that public safety item within the framework of public services is going to be, how do we make sure that we give these jobs to some true locals that want to be here and want to stay here? No offense to anyone that gets into those jobs, law enforcement, fire, but if your goal is to go somewhere else, maybe try to find a way to start somewhere else. Don't use us as your springboard, because we need our people to stay. They know the community. They know who causes the trouble and how do we deal with them. Or hey, we know these neighborhoods are specifically difficult to get in and out of from a hazards perspective. So if we're going to go up there when we respond to a call of a heart attack or an elderly person has fallen over, they know what to deal with. Because sometimes that just doesn't happen. People don't realize the fire truck is huge. It doesn't fit well on some of the roads in this community.
Yeah. I have two other quick questions regarding water that I want to touch on before we move on to a different subject. One of them is Lynx Lake. It was drained to fix a valve. Yep. Right? That thing's 30 feet low or something like that, and it's terrible.
It's really bad.
A lot of people are really frustrated by that, understandably so. Who makes the decision on draining that or fixing whatever was broken?
I believe that was a combination of Game and Fish and some of the city municipal leaders. I don't know how much information they had going into it. They could have done a better job preparing people. The optics are awful. It does look really bad. Hopefully they're taking some time to clean up the lake. I think when they realized they drained it, how gross a lot of the lake had become. This is one of those bad things about anything in municipal government at the city level. At the end of the day, you are kind of handcuffed to state law and worse, federal organizations. You get the EPA snooping around. You get, The FCC comes through and wants to look at your communication systems. And so you got these federal governing bodies that, like, I guess in practice have more authority than anyone locally does. And so they come along and they say, hey, this is a problem, you need to fix it or else. And of course, these groups can fine municipal governments. They can fine state governments.
Is that what happened with Lynx?
Not to my knowledge. My knowledge is that Game and Fish noticed there was an issue with the valve and it was going to impact the life of the whatever was going on in the lake. So the fish, the different critters that live in there. Mm-hmm. And so they needed to fix it. And I guess there was maybe some worry about whatever was going on downstream. Again, they've been light on details. I haven't been able to find good resources on why they had to do it.
Yeah. And there doesn't seem to be any effort to put water back.
No, I think the intent is just we'll let it refill as it refills.
That's probably going to take some years.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a while before that lake gets returned to its prior beauty. So
that's really frustrating.
Yeah.
My other question about water: there was an incident that took place. I believe it was in Prescott Valley. Might have been Prescott. I think it was a water tank on Glassford Hill. Mm-hmm. Somewhere over 1 million gallons of water in this tank setup. And there was, at 2 a.m., there were some people, I think two people.
Heard about this.
So you know about this. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what happened with that water? Do you know what they did?
I don't.
Apparently, they dumped over 1 million gallons of water and just got rid of it. And they didn't say anything about testing the water to see if there was something put in it or contaminated. Nothing. No even effort or mention of an effort to say, hey, we looked at the water. It's poisoned. We're going to get rid of it. They just got rid of it.
Now, my question with that is always, again, did state regulators just show up and go get rid of it? Because, I mean, really at the end of the day, they usually have to turn this crud over. And this really frustrates me. This is one of the biggest concerns I have with running for a city government position is, like, I look at what goes on at the state, and they get to have a lot of exercisable authority when they want. So I'm wondering if the state officials showed up and just said, get rid of it. You know, it's kind of like the apartment complex that burnt down. Like, how did that just go away quietly?
Yeah.
This dude's just running around out there like...
Yeah, $65,000 reward from the FBI turns into nobody knows and it's gone.
A lot of times I feel like this stuff just kind of gets swept under the rug. Like, hey, here's the next big issue. Let's ignore this and move on.
Yeah, the China mine, they call it, you know?
Yeah, what's going on with that? How did those guys show up with equipment and tools and everything? And everybody was like, oh, we didn't know they were up there. I'm like, really? You didn't know they were up there? There were people in Crown King freaking out on those roadways the whole time. Mm-hmm. I to be honest, I do want to look into that because I do remember hearing about, I guess there were some vandals. Yeah. That's what they're calling them. I don't know what the nature of the vandalism was, to your point. Well, they didn't really specify. They just said that they were up there doing stuff.
And you could swap the word vandals for terrorists. And if you're spray painting something or you're dumping fentanyl into a water tank.
Correct.
You know, we don't know.
Yeah. So,
It's just crazy somebody would just get rid of all that water without an attempt at testing it.
Could it even have been used in some... Okay, maybe there's no poison. Maybe it's not potable for humans.
Yeah.
But what is the water? It could be used for something. Yep. But they just tossed out a million gallons with no care in the world. That's a concern.
Yeah. So my question would be who makes those decisions? And I guess it could be state.
Yeah, I tend to find... and this could be a bit of a pass the buck thing. But I tend to find that what happens is if the issue gets a little too big for council's britches, we're going to work with this group and that group, and they're going to make the decision, right? That's like the whole rodeo lawsuit thing.
Yeah, they don't want the heat.
Correct. It's like the Gail Gardner neighborhood's really frustrated that the rodeo is supposed to be getting this money. We'll come out and say we're not for the rodeo just getting it with no strings attached. So what we'll do is we'll put this claimant on it that, like, in theory says, well, we're going to let the state make a decision. Like, they did make a decision. They gave them the money. So now you're kicking it back at them saying, hey, make a decision. Like, that's kind of goofy how that tends to go on in the municipal, that shirking of responsibility, in my opinion. I mean, at the end of the day, we're responsible for everything that goes on in this town, even if we don't control it. Yeah. I would at least be the person that comes out and says, here's what happened and why it happened. Yeah. I can't do anything. This is really unfortunate and it sucks. It sucks for you. It sucks for me. But here's what happened. And when it just kind of goes away like that, like 1 million gallons disappears and nobody comes out and says, here's what happened, that's a problem. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I think there's one other subject before we get to the general plan. And this is something about special interest groups. What kind of special interest groups are there in this area? And what kind of directions are they trying to push Prescott in?
You know, special interest groups always make it sound like it's something inherently negative. It's not always negative. There's always special interest groups. You have heritage groups, that are interested in protecting the heritage. You got the Western Heritage Group. You've got the rodeo. That is a special interest group. They have a specific thing they're interested in concertedly preserving. And then obviously you've got some bigger organizations that don't really have a set objective. Feels like it's very vague. Like I feel like Save the Dells kind of morphed into that. They hit their first goal, and then like I've always asked, I'm like, okay, Save the Dells is on one hand in town, you see them, they're still viable, they're still visible, very big influence. But then I hear they have these deep connections with Prescott Indivisible, which is a very overt liberal group in the community with a very set agenda, but their agenda is very wide open. They don't get specific on it, right? It's just like, oh, we just want everyone to feel safe and welcome. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Give us a definition of that. So there are these groups. Some carry a lot more clout and authority, while some have a big voice. So, I've noticed with like Save the Dells, they've kind of blended the two pretty well. They get their candidates elected. They've made it clear who they're supporting for this county or city election cycle. They're very clear that they want these three particular candidates in, which is Gehring, Mary Frederickson, and Kathy Rusing. And that's fine. As a group, you're allowed to say, hey, this is who we're getting behind. And I even have one getting behind me, Prescott United. I'm not beholden to them. I know some of the people within the group. They said, hey, you wanted to run. Do you mind if we support you? Yeah, I'll take support. I'll take Save the Dells support if they'd be willing to give it. But so far, none of them have even spoken with me. I've tried reaching out, never heard back. Prescott Indivisible, I got them to them add me to their Facebook group just because I am very curious as to what they're doing. It's pretty typical progressive politics for them. If they're doing something deeper and sinister, I haven't been able to find a way in and see it.
So you separate deeper and sinister from typical left-wing
Well, I do think typical left-wing politics in and of itself is designed to undermine the family. It's designed to emasculate men. And I do think that inherently big government is better, and that's a huge problem. So yeah, progressive politics are really concerning for me from that perspective. In my sense of things, I can see what's out in the open and visible, and at least I know that that's what it is.
Yeah.
Now, what they're doing behind their closed doors, what they're putting out there, is there something there that like is a big problem?
Yeah.
With Prescott Indivisible, there's a good chance. I've heard the stories. I just haven't been able to verify and validate anything.
Yeah.
And I've asked. They're like, well, that's speculation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is there any merit to the speculation? What are you doing? I don't know.
Any Soros funding going on in any of these groups that you're aware of?
They definitely have East Coast funding. It's coming from somewhere else. You don't build the audience that they've built with the following that they've built on grassroots, right? That's always the presentation. Oh, you just bootstrapped it. I'm like, nah, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
I've been a part of bootstrapping things in this community for almost a decade now, and I'm like, we've never gotten anywhere near that kind of clout and visibility within in terms of voice. So Prescott Indivisible is an odd duck in this community, especially given that, I think they said 71% voted for Trump in the last election.
I actually have a...
There's 87,000 members.
Here I have 66.48% of Yavapai County voters supported President Trump and voted Republican in 2024.
Okay. That's less than I thought. Huh.
It's a little surprising for this area, but that subject brings me into the general plan. What is the general plan, and why do we do it?
The general plan is supposed to be like the high level, like this is what Prescott's vision is for the next 4 years. It's very interesting because they sort of put it together.
I believe it's a 10-year thing, and it's what I was reading is that they have to give a report to the state.
Yes.
This is our projection. Our projected trajectory for the next 10 years.
Yes. The reason why I'm saying it's kind of 4 years is because there's an opening toward the end of what would be my city council term.
Okay. To
have an impact on the rest of that plan. I don't know that you can like overrule it a few years in if it's not working out. This is a couple of things I've asked about and I can't get right-sided clarity on. But the general plan is basically here's the plan for Prescott at a very high level for growth, our economic activity, and what we anticipate for our needs as a community. And what it's supposed to do is communicate up to the state, the state governance, which ultimately winds up with the federal government, of like, hey, this is what we're seeing in our communities. This is what our needs are going to be. And how are we going to make sure that all of this stuff gets addressed, right? Because Department of Transportation has to put resources back into the roads and understanding of the community. They have to know there's talks right now at the federal level because of what happened in California. Are they going to have to put in extra regulatory mechanisms for like insurance because so many homes have been burning down? And I'm sure you've been hearing people are losing their insurance in Prescott. Insurance companies don't want to insure them. So my understanding of the general plan is in part that. It's also, to me, because it lacks specifics, it's kind of a puff piece. It's like a PR campaign. It's like, here, this is Prescott. Look at how great we are. Here's where we're going and what we're doing. So there's that, and there's the strategic plan, and they kind of play off of each other.
Okay. So
the general plan isn't. It's a very high level document explaining what Prescott is and where it's headed. And that is on the Prescott City website. Just in case anybody's ever interested in going and finding it, you can find the general plan and in its current state. And I believe that is what they've delivered to the state, is what is in the current state.
I got an action alert that I was reading through from, I believe it's Yavapai Republicans. Mm-hmm. And I've never looked at these. Somebody forwarded this to me to read it. And I want to go through a couple of the things that they say here. And this is one reason I ask about special interest groups. And basically, this November, there's been a 10-year general plan that's been introduced during the Biden administration's time. Mm-hmm. And this November, it's going to be either confirmed or rejected by the people.
Yep.
And one of the arguments is that it's a comprehensive set of strategies developed by consultants with specific policy objectives that seem unrealistic to achieve in a 10-year window, posing serious risks of financial and operational burdens on the city and its taxpayers. That's part of argument one. And then argument two, the 2025 general plan update is already outdated and out of step with the direction of the new Trump administration. Its inclusion of progressive DEI and Green New Deal style language and agenda, crafted to mirror Biden-era policies, now puts Prescott at a serious risk of losing critical federal funding. President Trump's executive orders explicitly reject these types of initiatives, and failure to revise the plan accordingly could result in substantial financial consequences for the city. If this agenda-driven language remains, how does the city intend to make up for the potential loss of millions in federal grants? And the numbers that they give for housing is between 1 and 4 million from the Community Development Block Grant.
I was going to say these are the grants, right?
Yeah, the federal grants that are at risk of losing if they confirm this general plan. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah. I believe the general plan was built to sort of bring Prescott into lockstep with Katie Hobbs.
Yeah.
There is the diversity language in there. Yep. 100%. It's not merit-based. It's we're going to make certain objectives to hire certain types of people to give the impression that Prescott is more diverse than even it actually is statistically, which
that's crazy.
If you're good at doing what you're doing, get the job.
Yeah.
You get the job. There's not, I run a business. That's how I hire.
That's how real life works.
Correct. What's really interesting, and the candidates that are running for Save the Dells are all in favor of the general plan. The biggest concern I have with it, to the point of the debt that it'll incur, is that it's not just a loss in grants. It's how are we going to do all of this? Guarantee the water regulatory that they want to put into place, the protection of the open spaces. We're talking about annexing hundreds, if not thousands, of potential acres with no ability to change anything, mind you, at all into perpetuity. The land can only be utilized if the voters decide to utilize it. So there can be no changes by the city to impact that. And so the general plan has, I'm not as familiar with the Green New Deal, this whole green. To me, what they've done there is probably tied that into some of the language around water, with sort of treating a finite resource with hey, we shouldn't let anybody use anything anymore. And they're already doing the subsidies right now, right? If you have natural turf, they want the city will pay you to tear up your grass, and they won't give you any money to do something different, but they will give you money to take away your grass.
What?
Yeah, that's the kind of initiatives that we're talking about here. This is where their concerns are.
To use less water to water your grass?
Correct.
Really?
So, yeah, that's the kind of initiatives they're taking on. And so I could see where some of that's popping up, but definitely the diversity stuff is in there. And, fundamentally, I'm like, we just don't need language like that. It's not useful. It's not productive. And what is the intended impact? Like, are you hoping to attract some special minority group to Prescott from some far off reaching community that probably doesn't want to be here anyways for just a single job and an opportunity? And what was interesting is that Roosing did come out and she's like, yeah, I'm all for this language. I'm like,
I don't think it would be for jobs. I think it would be for influence of the culture in this area.
Yeah.
To kind of move things in the direction of the way that LA went and all these, the wokeism.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are definitely a few politicians within this community, so beyond just council even, that are fine with the idea that we move to kind of a more progressive state of things. I think that's deeply unfortunate. I think it's going to be a problem. It definitely seems to fly in the face of how America just voted this last election. So I don't know what it's going to contain for Prescott's future, but it's a definite concern.
Yeah. A little blurb from argument 3 in this call to action is the Vision Zero, quote unquote, policies embedded in this general plan update represent a direct assault on the personal freedoms and mobility of Prescott residents. These requirements would impose costly restrictive measures that limit property rights and individual choice, all under the guise of safety and sustainability. The plan seeks to reshape Prescott into a tightly controlled, compact urban environment modeled after the 15-minute city concept, etc.
Yeah.
So that sounds like some languaging that's kind of puffing it up. Maybe if there is an intention for a 15-minute style city thing, kind of like in Prescott Valley where they're building that mall, whatever that thing is.
Kind of core economic area.
Yeah.
I think there is some validity to that, though. It's these, hey, private landowners, builders, developers, all of these people have kind of been thrown into this consortium of villains, local villains. And I always kind of laugh because I'm like, they could have made a lot more money if they would have just picked up and moved down to the valley. Like if their goal was just to make money, just a cash grab, you always see people post on Facebook for sure, but next door too is like follow the money. I'm like, if you were going to follow the money, you'd follow it down to Phoenix because there was a heck of a lot more money to make down there than what there was up here. So if you've got guys who are building up here or developing some of the real estate in town and they're trying to build a community that is a bit more spread out and a little less tightly controlled, they would have just gone and just made money down in the city because they've been up here for decades. Their families are long-standing families within this community.
Yeah.
And so what I think that what they're kind of alluding to there is that there's this vilification of private landowners, capitalists, entrepreneurs, and this willingness in the general plan to say, these are the bad guys, and these are the people we don't want in this community. And I'm like, that's not how this needs to be. The city can work with them. We can discuss growth in a strategic and amenable way. But to vilify them and put them into this kind of outcast scenario is going to be a bad thing. And honestly, to me, what it sounds like is someone's going to make money, right?
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. It just depends on who that is and how they're going to do it. But where the city's going to get into trouble is when they infringe on the rights of those people that own those property and their right to do what they want with it.
Yeah.
So it's going to become a problem.
And that's a lot of generational land that's been passed down from early when this country was developed or founded.
Yeah. It's been in the hands of some of these families for nearly a century in some cases, and some will never sell it off, and you won't see it get turned into anything. We also have 1.5 million acres owned by the federal government for the National Forest System. We have BLM up here north of Prescott and Prescott Valley. That's managed by the state, and they can sell that if they need to because it can fund schools, it can fund state projects, whatever they need to do with that land. But so far, very little land has moved. The bulk of Arizona is owned by the state or the federal government.
Is BLM state or federal?
State. Bureau of Land Management.
Okay, so that's separate than the forest.
Correct. The Forest
National
Service or the parks. The Parks, Forest Service, those are their own contingencies. The rest is BLM. And it's something ridiculous, like 80% is owned by the state of the land in Arizona.
Okay. Permitting issue, we went over that. Okay, so what kind of threats do you see on the horizon for Prescott that nobody's really talking about?
Yeah, the fiscal stuff. I mean, it kind of got addressed in there. Like, I'm really worried about Prescott from like hey, if we don't allow certain types of growth, the tourism economy is already showing some signs of weakening. But again, too, like we need a diversity of, and I know diversity sounds like a rough word. I just mean demographics in the sense of like...
We want the actual definition of diversity, not the new definition.
Yeah, not the woke definition.
Yeah.
We're talking diversity in terms of like the types of people that are here from a lifestyle and earnings standpoint. So like my family, we make decent money. We can go out, we can eat, we can do the shopping, we can go spend our money. Some of the retirees aren't a fixed income, man.
Yep.
They can't go out and blow money at steakhouses all the time or restaurants or go down to my buddy's place, Founding Fathers, and have a couple of beers 3 nights a week if they wanted, right? Yeah. They're living on a fixed income, and that is fine. But you need some of these different categories in Prescott that can do these different things because they support the system that ultimately creates tax revenue. I'm concerned about the city because they've shown now for several quarters that tax revenue is weakening, and we're over leveraged in multiple categories. It was Chris Cucagno, who's a county supervisor. He brought up at one of the forums, he's like, hey, essentially the retirement account for what we pay our public servants after they've moved on and retired. He's like, we just got that budget fixed and now we're already $1 million in the hole. Like, what are we going to do about this? Because it's constant. And it's true. Now, part of that was the Granite Mountain Hot Shots situation that was very poorly handled by the city at the time, with how they were paying that out and their pensions and this and that and the other thing. A lot of that was getting dug out of that hole. But, I mean, the city has always been kind of in this pension hole. And it's going to continue unless there's a game plan to address it. And so for me, the fiscal component and our responsibility to the taxpayer is key. And there's 2 ways to do it. You can either grow the tax base, meaning you can get better ways of revenue, or you go back to the taxpayer and say, we're just going to need some more.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you the taxpayer is about as sick of that as they can get.
Yep.
They're like, no, we're not. We're paying our fair share. Why do we always need to pay more? Because you guys can't manage what you've been given responsibly. So for me, I'm like, all right, how do we attract a better format of business so it's not just retail and service jobs? Add a 4th leg to the economy. I consider Prescott's economy to be a 3-legged stool. It's retail, tourism driven. It's construction, and it's kind of medical. Medical has become a bigger component. There's taxes that, I've got a rod through my leg, cost a lot of money. I paid a local sales tax on that. So all that surgical equipment, all those parts that go into, hip replacements and whatnot, if we can do those up here, there's a nice component that goes into the revenue. But those are the 3 kind of core stools to the economy. We have a very small limited tech segment up at the airport where you have, smaller aerospace engineering-based businesses. But I think we could do a lot more to attract those types of companies that can be remote, semi-remote, have smaller staffing, but Prescott's quality of life, the living situation here is better. What happens when those families come here? They're earning a good wage. They go out and they put money into the community. Yep. That's what we need to do. So the fiscal responsibility component is a big concern because I feel like that prop that passed last year to get, public safety to the forefront, I'm like, that's just going to be the beginning of our woes if we don't start addressing this stuff.
What would you call that 4th leg if you could give it a title?
A professional sector. We need a good working professional sector. Blue collar does well. I know a lot of guys that are in the blue collar spaces that are making good money. Electricians, plumbers, they're all making that $35 an hour, maybe a little more mark. So the blue collar does well when it's doing well, but with housing, it fluctuates. So if we're building, we're growing, they're doing great. If it's not happening, they're struggling. Yeah. So theirs is a bit of a wave they got to ride out. And so when their pockets get tight, they don't have money to spend at the bars and the restaurants and the retail. Whereas like the kind of professional service space, the white collar type jobs, I mean, they're working for big corporations. They're a net impact. They're constantly just bringing in money. So they've got money to spend consistently throughout the years.
Yeah, I wonder if the people that complain about the growth are the same people that complain about not having the money to spend. But if there's growth, there's more jobs to be able to make money. Interesting.
Yeah, there does seem to be a little bit of like shared interaction between those 2 groups.
Yeah, like the hand doesn't know what the foot's doing.
Correct.
That's unfortunate, and it makes sense though, because these subjects are complex when you get into communities and infrastructure and economy and how does it all work together and flow. But you seem to have a pretty good grasp of a lot of this stuff. I think that's about all I've got. I've got one kind of final question, and this is always something that people don't like to hear, is that we need your money. But I know in order to do what you're doing, it takes fundraising and donations, and I want to understand, I guess, two things from you. Why are you running? Why should I vote for you? And why is it important that people support you running financially?
Yeah. The first thing is I'm running because, I do care about Prescott deeply. Not just our beautiful natural resources and our quaint little town. I care about our values and our heritage. I am conservative. I am Republican. I've been lifelong conservative. I haven't always been lifelong Republican. I made that clear at RWAP, and they were like, "Oh," I'm like, "What? I don't just get in line.
How dare you?"
I won't. Yeah, I'm not. I go. I can't. I'm not loyal to a fault.
Yeah.
I have to be analytical and strategic about what I think about things. And I said the government for most of the aughts and the teens was a total letdown. They weren't focused on the right things. You had Bush that got us embroiled in a couple of wars where it looked like there was just no escape for a long time. And then you get Obama, who came in with hope and change. And I think even his party now has come to terms with he was just more of the elite.
Yeah.
More of the same. He had White House parties with famous rock stars and rap gods and all these people that are like, who are these people, right? Now they're all in trouble with Diddy.
Yeah.
So now we need to really know what's going on. What was he doing back then at those White House parties? But, you get Trump, who came in, and I'm a believer in a lot of the things that Trump wants to achieve, where I may struggle sometimes with the personality, right?
Yeah.
Personality is a little rough. But at the end of the day, the things that I think he's for is a stronger, better America. I am for a stronger, better Prescott.
Yeah.
I want Prescott to be that shining hill, city on a hill that represents the best of Arizona. Phoenix is chaotic right now.
Oh, man.
It's gotten very blue.
It's terrible.
A lot of homeless. We left there a long time ago because it was just not just the heat, but our stuff was getting broken into all the time, and the police would show up and be like, "What do you want?"
Sorry, I'll take a report.
Yeah, but that's as far as this is going. You're one of a dozen of these today for me.
Yeah.
So for me, it was Prescott is everything that Arizona should have been. That last great bastion of Western heritage, Wild West. And I want to make sure that we keep that. I want to make sure that the next generation of kids, one of them is my own child, that she gets to grow up in a community that values Christ, that values her family, that values, good traditional sense of things, of what family's about. If you don't like a husband and a wife and a couple kids, family, there's plenty of states and cities that'll have you. Prescott's about that. That's what our families are like. We are a pretty traditional community. And I'm not saying that we don't have to be loving and caring to anyone else. That's not what I'm advocating for, but I'm advocating for that sense of who we are. And so why I'm doing this is for those reasons and to secure that future. I keep telling people, it's we got to protect our heritage to secure our future. If you're not going to protect the heritage, who cares what the future is going to be? Because it's going to be a mess and it's not going to matter. And so why I'm getting involved with this at this level is because I see these issues. Some of them are minor and kind of whatever. Some of them are going to be big and problematic. I'd like to see a Prescott that still stands when I'm getting to 60 and I'm still a part of this community, and my daughter's now grown up, and if she wants to have a family here, I want that to be the case for her. And I'd like to give them some more resources than what I had, because I had to leave at 18. I didn't know what to do. I was like, well, I got through community college. Now what? You want to go be a roofer again? I'm like, nope, I'm not getting back on that roof. I know that much. So, I got out of there. So that's the big piece of the why I'm doing this. It's for the families and the community that I've developed over the years here and who these people are. And they are great people. I hate the fact that there's some of this infighting that's going on at this local level, because I'm like, I know all y'all.
Yeah.
I grew up with your kids. We've been friends all my life. I don't want to say bad things about anybody. I'm not looking to knock anyone down a peg. I may disagree with some things, like the DEI language in the general plan. I don't like that. I don't think it's necessary. I don't know why we're doing that. But at the same time, if that person wants to say, I need this, okay, I disagree. I don't see it as a necessity, but we're still community members, right? I'm not a representative from Arizona and you're a representative from Washington, and we can hate each other and because we're never going to deal with each other outside of Congress.
We're neighbors. We're all neighbors.
We're all neighbors. So that's my big thing. And then the secondary piece of this, the fundraising, It's a hard thing. I've always struggled to help nonprofits that have a great mission to raise money, right? Like working with Young Life and stuff. Asking for money for my personal political campaign feels a little gross sometimes. Because like, what are you going to do with it? I'm going to buy signs.
Yeah.
Like it just feels so lame.
Yeah.
But people do vote on name recognition.
Yeah.
I wish everyone could sit down and listen to these long form podcasts or listen to the radio where I can get questioned and especially, like I've done a couple KYCA things. Call me and ask. But not everybody does that. They don't have time. They don't have the wherewithal or the understanding of where to even find some of this stuff.
If they even care and recognize that
Correct.
There's an election happening.
Correct. That's true. Local politics get no votes.
Yeah. When's the election?
Yeah, it's August 5th. It's the primary. So if we get a certain percentage of the votes, we don't have to go to a runoff to the general. So ideally, we're done in August because I don't really want to go all the way to November. I'd like to know. I'm either in or I'm not. But that's the biggest thing to do the fundraising for is you got to pay for things. And right now I'm paying for a lot of stuff out of pocket. Yeah. Which is fine. Got to get it going. But it's just to get the name recognition out there so people can see and hopefully learn more who I am. I mean, you can go to ebarbforprescott.com.
Is that
That's
where
my
people
personal website.
can donate?
That's where they can donate. There's a donate button there. That's where you can find out a little bit more about me. But I got a lot of businesses, so you just type in Henry Ebarb into the internet. Again, look for the second. Don't go to my grandfather and be like, "Who's this old man?" That's not the guy in the video. No. But you could find out a lot about me online. Period. Just because there's stuff out there. I've been in business a long time. I'm active on certain social media accounts, especially LinkedIn. I mean, you could see my values. You could see where I come from. You could see what I prioritize. And
this Eastspire event, this debate, when is that happening?
June 5th.
Are there any other events that you have coming up?
I'll be at a couple of different forums. I am speaking to the CWAG group, I believe, although I haven't heard back from them. Thank you for reminding me. I got to check with those guys. And then I guess Prescott Indivisible is hosting some kind of a forum. They asked me to come. I will talk to everybody. And unfortunately, you're going to hear some things that you're like, I don't like that you're saying that, but it is who I am, and I'm not going to hide. I will speak to anybody. There's one thing I respect about Trump. He's willing to talk to anybody. The guy does not care.
All topics are fair game.
Correct. He'll get in there. So for me, it's like, this is your chance. I'll be at these different events. Most of the Republican events have already come and passed. I think I'll be at one of the RWAP events again soon. But I'll be around.
Cool.
I'll be at the parades, the rodeo. I'll be there.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. And best of luck to you.
Thank you.